Marcus Williams stood on the deck of his stunning lakefront mansion, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and orange. The successful tech entrepreneur had worked 15 years to afford this dream home in the exclusive Willowbrook Estates community. The three-story contemporary house featured floor-to-ceiling windows, a private dock, and sprawling gardens that stretched down to the pristine lake. At 38, Marcus had built his software company from nothing into a multi-million-dollar business. He employed over 200 people and had earned every dollar through countless 18-hour days and sleepless nights. This house represented more than wealth. It symbolized breaking barriers and achieving the American dream despite growing up in a rough neighborhood where many said he'd never amount to anything. The Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association had initially seemed welcoming when Marcus purchased the property 18 months ago. The community boasted manicured lawns, tree-lined streets, and homes valued between $2 and $5 million. Most residents were wealthy professionals: doctors, lawyers, business executives, and retired corporate leaders. Marcus had hoped to find neighbors who shared his appreciation for success and hard work. However, subtle tensions began emerging almost immediately. Some neighbors questioned whether he truly belonged in such an upscale community. During HOA meetings, certain members made veiled comments about maintaining community standards and preserving property values. Marcus noticed how conversations often stopped when he entered rooms, and how some residents seemed surprised when he mentioned owning rather than renting his home. The HOA president, Karen Mitchell, particularly seemed to view Marcus with suspicion. A 52-year-old real estate agent with perfectly styled blonde hair and an attitude to match, Karen had lived in Willowbrook for over a decade. She considered herself the community's unofficial guardian, someone who ensured everything remained appropriate for their prestigious neighborhood. Karen's husband, Robert, owned a successful accounting firm, and together they lived in a massive colonial-style home 3 houses down from Marcus. Their property featured elaborate landscaping and a circular driveway where Karen's white Mercedes SUV sat prominently displayed. She took pride in knowing every community rule and regulation, often citing specific HOA bylaws from memory during heated discussions. From the beginning, Karen found reasons to complain about Marcus's property. She claimed his modern architectural style clashed with the neighborhood's traditional aesthetic, despite the home being professionally designed and approved during construction. She questioned his landscaping choices, suggesting his minimalist garden design didn't meet community standards for appropriate beautification. Marcus tried maintaining cordial relationships with all neighbors, including Karen. He attended HOA meetings regularly, participated in community discussions, and even volunteered for neighborhood improvement projects. Despite his efforts, Karen's complaints continued escalating. She began documenting what she called violations of community standards, taking photographs of his property from various angles and submitting formal complaints to the HOA board. The situation reached a new level when Marcus announced plans for his annual summer celebration. For the past 5 years, he had hosted a large gathering for employees, clients, business partners, and friends. The event celebrated his company's anniversary and served as both a networking opportunity and appreciation party for those who had supported his entrepreneurial journey. This year's celebration would be particularly special. Marcus's company had just secured a major government contract worth $50 million, and he wanted to share his success with the people who had helped make it possible. He planned to invite approximately 100 guests for an elegant evening, featuring catered dining, live jazz music, and awards recognizing outstanding employee contributions. Marcus followed all proper procedures for hosting the event. He submitted the required forms to the HOA 30 days in advance, as specified in community regulations. He provided detailed information about guest numbers, parking arrangements, catering logistics, and entertainment plans. The event would run from 6 in the evening until 10 at night, well within the community's noise ordinance timeframes. He hired a professional event planning company to handle all arrangements. They would provide valet parking to minimize street congestion, use his spacious circular driveway and designated overflow areas for vehicles. Professional caterers would serve dinner on his large deck and patio areas, while a small jazz quartet would provide tasteful background music at reasonable volume levels. The HOA board met to review Marcus's application and Karen immediately raised objections. She argued that 100 guests would overwhelm the quiet residential community and create unacceptable disruption for other residents. She claimed the event would generate excessive noise, traffic, and parking problems that violated community standards for peaceful enjoyment of property. Other board members seemed hesitant to approve such a large gathering. Despite Marcus having followed all proper procedures, Karen presented her concerns persuasively, suggesting the event would set a dangerous precedent, allowing other residents to host similarly large parties. She recommended limiting guest numbers to 25 people maximum, despite no such restriction existing in the HOA bylaws. Marcus attended the board meeting to address their concerns directly. He explained the professional nature of his event, the careful planning involved, and his commitment to ensuring minimal impact on neighbors. He pointed out that several other residents had hosted large gatherings without controversy, including Karen's own pool parties that regularly featured 30 or 40 guests. The board ultimately approved Marcus's event with additional conditions. They required him to provide extra security, limit music volume to specific decibel levels, and ensure all guests parked in designated areas only. Marcus agreed to every condition, understanding their desire to maintain community harmony while exercising his legitimate property rights. Karen left the meeting visibly frustrated by the board's decision. She had expected stronger support for her position and felt the approval represented a dangerous precedent. In her mind, Marcus's celebration would fundamentally change the character of their exclusive community, potentially opening doors for future disruptions she deemed unacceptable. As Marcus finalized preparations for his celebration, he remained focused on creating a memorable evening for his guests while respecting all community guidelines. He had no idea that Karen was already developing plans to disrupt his event in ways that would soon escalate far beyond simple HOA complaints. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test the boundaries of property rights, community relations, and basic human decency in ways none of them could have anticipated. The evening of Marcus's celebration arrived with perfect weather. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers across the lake, and the setting sun created a magical atmosphere for the gathering. Professional caterers had transformed his deck and patio into an elegant dining space with white linens, crystal glasses, and soft lighting that highlighted the natural beauty of the lakefront property. Guests began arriving promptly at 6 o'clock, and Marcus felt proud watching his vision come to life. His employees mingled with clients and business partners, creating the exact networking atmosphere he had hoped for. The jazz quartet played softly in the background while servers offered appetizers and drinks. Everyone seemed genuinely impressed by the beautiful setting and Marcus's gracious hospitality. Dr. Jennifer Lawson, Marcus's longtime mentor and a successful surgeon, complimented him on creating such a professional yet welcoming environment. "You've really outdone yourself this time," she said, gesturing toward the lake view. "This is exactly the kind of celebration your success deserves." Marcus had carefully planned every detail to ensure the event met all HOA requirements while showcasing his achievement. Security personnel monitored the entrance and parking areas, ensuring guests used only designated spaces. The catering staff maintained impeccable service standards, and the music remained at conversational volume levels that wouldn't disturb neighbors. Meanwhile, Karen Mitchell watched the gathering from her living room window with growing irritation. Despite the professional nature of the event and Marcus's compliance with all regulations, she felt personally offended by the sight of so many people enjoying themselves on his property. In her mind, this celebration represented everything wrong with allowing certain people into their exclusive community. Karen had spent the past week contacting other HOA members, trying to build support for stopping the event. Most neighbors seemed indifferent, recognizing that Marcus had followed proper procedures and had every right to host guests on his own property. Some even expressed admiration for his success and the elegant way he was celebrating with friends and colleagues. Frustrated by her neighbors' lack of support, Karen decided to take matters into her own hands. She convinced her husband Robert and 2 other couples to join her in what she called a community patrol to monitor the party for violations. They would document any infractions of HOA rules, noise ordinances, or parking regulations that could justify shutting down the celebration. Around 7:30, as guests were being seated for dinner, Karen's group began walking through the neighborhood near Marcus's property. They carried measuring devices for checking noise levels, cameras for documenting any violations, and copies of HOA bylaws for reference. Karen wore her most authoritative outfit and carried a clipboard, determined to project official authority. The group found no legitimate violations to report. Guests were well behaved, music levels remained within acceptable limits, and all vehicles were properly parked in designated areas. The security team was managing traffic flow efficiently, and the catering staff was maintaining clean and orderly operations throughout the property. Karen's frustration intensified as she realized the event was proceeding exactly as Marcus had promised during the HOA meeting. She had expected to find obvious violations that would justify intervention, but the professional execution of every aspect left her with no grounds for legitimate complaints. At 8 o'clock, Marcus stood to address his guests with a brief speech acknowledging their support for his company's growth. He thanked employees for their dedication, clients for their trust, and friends for their encouragement during challenging times. The heartfelt remarks were met with warm applause and genuine appreciation from everyone in attendance. Watching from across the street, Karen became increasingly agitated by the positive atmosphere surrounding Marcus's celebration. She interpreted the guests' obvious enjoyment and respect for their host as somehow diminishing her own status in the community. The success of his event felt like a personal defeat in her ongoing campaign to maintain what she considered appropriate community standards. Karen made a fateful decision that would change everything. Rather than accepting that Marcus had legitimately earned the right to celebrate his achievements, she decided to escalate her intervention in ways that would cross legal and ethical boundaries. She convinced her group that extraordinary circumstances required extraordinary measures to protect their community's character. "We can't let this become a regular occurrence," Karen told her companions. "If we don't take a stand now, other residents will think they can host these kinds of massive gatherings whenever they want. Our property values and quality of life will suffer permanently." Robert Mitchell expressed some hesitation about his wife's increasingly aggressive stance. "Karen, maybe we should just let this one go. He followed all the rules, and it seems like a nice professional event. These aren't college kids having a keg party." Karen dismissed her husband's concerns with a wave of her hand. "You don't understand what's at stake here. This is about preserving the exclusive nature of our community. We worked hard to afford homes in Willowbrook Estates, and we have every right to protect our investment from inappropriate influences." The other couples in Karen's group were also beginning to feel uncomfortable with her intense hostility toward Marcus's celebration. They had originally agreed to monitor the event for legitimate violations, not to manufacture reasons for disrupting a lawful gathering. However, Karen's forceful personality and claims about protecting property values made it difficult for them to voice their growing doubts. As 9 o'clock approached, Marcus's guests were enjoying dessert and coffee while the jazz quartet continued playing gentle background music. The evening had exceeded everyone's expectations, with several clients already discussing potential future business opportunities and employees expressing genuine appreciation for being included in such an elegant celebration. Karen's patience finally reached its breaking point when she saw guests laughing and taking photos near the lake. In her mind, their obvious enjoyment represented a threat to everything she believed Willowbrook Estates should represent. She made the decision that would soon lead to legal consequences she never anticipated. "We're going over there," Karen announced to her group. "I'm going to exercise my authority as HOA president to inspect this gathering for compliance with community standards. If Marcus wants to host events like this, he needs to understand that we have oversight responsibilities." Robert tried one more time to dissuade his wife from confronting Marcus directly. "Karen, this could backfire badly. He's followed all the rules and you'll look like you're harassing him for no good reason." Karen's response revealed the depth of her determination to assert control over the situation. "I am the HOA president, and I have both the right and the responsibility to ensure community standards are maintained. Marcus Williams needs to understand that success doesn't give him permission to disrupt our neighborhood whenever he pleases." The group reluctantly followed Karen as she marched across the street toward Marcus's property, carrying her clipboard and wearing an expression of righteous indignation. None of them realized they were about to commit acts that would result in expensive legal consequences and public humiliation that would haunt them for years to come. Karen Mitchell strode across the street toward Marcus's property with her small group, following reluctantly behind. She had worked herself into a state of righteous indignation, convinced that her position as HOA president gave her authority to intervene in what she deemed an inappropriate gathering. Her clipboard clutched tightly in her hand. She approached the security guard stationed at the entrance to Marcus's driveway. "I'm Karen Mitchell, president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association," she announced loudly to the security officer. "I'm here to conduct an official inspection of this event for compliance with community standards and HOA regulations." The professional security guard, hired by Marcus's event planning company, politely but firmly explained that he had clear instructions about guest access. "Ma'am, I'll need to check with Mr. Williams before allowing anyone not on the guest list onto the property. Would you like me to contact him for you?" Karen's face flushed red with anger at being treated like an uninvited visitor at what she considered her own community event. "You don't understand. I have official authority here. This is HOA business, and I don't need permission from Marcus Williams to inspect compliance with community regulations." The security guard remained professional despite Karen's increasingly aggressive tone. "I understand your position, ma'am, but my instructions are very clear. No one enters the property without being on the guest list or receiving specific approval from Mr. Williams. I'd be happy to call him right now if you'd like." Before the guard could reach for his radio, Karen pushed past him and marched onto Marcus's property, followed by her group of companions who were growing more uncomfortable by the minute. The security officer immediately radioed for backup, while following the uninvited visitors to ensure they didn't cause any disruption to the celebration. Marcus noticed the commotion near his entrance and excused himself from a conversation with several clients to investigate. He approached Karen's group with a calm but concerned expression, hoping to resolve whatever issue had brought them to his event uninvited. "Good evening, Karen," Marcus said politely. "I wasn't expecting to see you tonight. Is there something I can help you with?" Karen raised her clipboard like a weapon and launched into a tirade that shocked everyone within hearing distance. "Mr. Williams, I'm here in my official capacity as HOA president to inspect this gathering for violations of community standards. This excessive noise, traffic, and general disruption is completely unacceptable for our neighborhood." Marcus looked puzzled by her accusations since the event was proceeding exactly as approved by the HOA board. "Karen, I'm not sure what violations you're referring to. We followed all the requirements discussed at the board meeting, and I have security monitoring everything to ensure compliance." "Don't give me that innocent act," Karen snapped, her voice rising to a level that began attracting attention from nearby guests. 100 people partying until all hours of the night is not what we agreed to when we approved your little gathering. This is exactly the kind of inappropriate behavior that threatens our community's character." Several of Marcus's guests, including prominent business leaders and community members, began gathering to witness the unfolding confrontation. Dr. Jennifer Lawson stepped closer to Marcus's side, recognizing that something was seriously wrong with Karen's aggressive behavior and unfounded accusations. Marcus maintained his composure despite Karen's hostile tone. "The event is scheduled to end at 10 o'clock, just as I indicated in my application. The music levels are within the specified limits and all parking is in designated areas. I'm not sure what specific violation you're concerned about." Karen's husband Robert tried to pull his wife aside, recognizing that her behavior was becoming increasingly irrational and potentially embarrassing. "Karen, maybe we should discuss this privately. These folks are just trying to enjoy their evening." Karen whirled around to face her husband with fury in her eyes. "Don't you dare undermine my authority here, Robert. I'm protecting our property values and community standards from this inappropriate invasion." The word invasion hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he realized Karen's hostility went far deeper than simple HOA concerns. Her language and aggressive behavior suggested underlying prejudices that had nothing to do with legitimate community regulations. "Mrs. Mitchell," Dr. Lawson interjected in her authoritative surgeon's voice, "I think there may be some misunderstanding here. This is a beautiful professional celebration, and everyone has been perfectly well behaved. Perhaps you could discuss any concerns with Mr. Williams privately tomorrow." Karen turned her attention to Dr. Lawson with even greater hostility. "And who exactly are you to tell me how to handle HOA business?" This is a community matter, and outsiders don't get to interfere with our neighborhood governance. The situation escalated further when Karen began walking around Marcus's deck and patio areas, taking photos of guests and demanding to see permits for the catering setup. Her behavior became increasingly erratic as she realized she couldn't find any legitimate violations to justify her intervention. "Where are your noise level measurements?" Karen demanded, pointing her finger accusingly at Marcus. "Where's your documentation proving compliance with parking regulations? I want to see proof that this gathering meets every single requirement we discussed." Marcus's event planner, a professional woman who had managed hundreds of similar celebrations, approached with documented evidence of compliance with all HOA requirements. "Ma'am, I have all the permits, measurements, and documentation right here. Everything has been properly arranged according to the specifications provided by the Homeowners Association." Karen refused to look at the documentation, instead becoming more agitated by the professional competence surrounding Marcus's celebration. "I don't care what paperwork you have. I can see with my own eyes that this event is inappropriate for our community. 100 people drinking and carrying on until all hours is completely unacceptable." "Mrs. Mitchell," Marcus said firmly, "it's currently 9:15, and the event is scheduled to end in 45 minutes. The music is at conversation level, and there has been no excessive drinking or inappropriate behavior. I'm not sure what you're actually objecting to." Karen's response revealed the true nature of her hostility in words that would soon become evidence in legal proceedings. "What I'm objecting to is people like you thinking you can turn our exclusive community into your personal party zone. We worked hard to maintain certain standards here, and we're not going to let anyone lower our property values with these kinds of gatherings." The phrase "people like you" created an immediate hush among the guests who heard it. Marcus felt his jaw tighten as he realized Karen's objections had nothing to do with HOA regulations and everything to do with her personal prejudices about who belonged in Willowbrook Estates. Dr. Lawson stepped forward protectively. "Mrs. Mitchell, I think you need to leave immediately. Your behavior is completely inappropriate, and you're disrupting a private gathering on Mr. Williams's own property." Karen's response would soon become the centerpiece of legal action that would cost her dearly. "I'm not going anywhere until I'm satisfied that this invasion of our community is brought under control. As HOA president, I have the authority to shut down any gathering that threatens our neighborhood's character." What happened next would transform a simple celebration into a legal battle that would expose the ugly truth about Karen's motivations and result in consequences she never anticipated. Karen's declaration that she had authority to shut down Marcus's celebration marked the point where her behavior crossed from inappropriate into potentially illegal territory. Several guests began recording the confrontation on their phones, sensing that something significant was unfolding that needed to be documented. "Mrs. Mitchell," Marcus said with careful control, "I need to ask you and your group to leave my property immediately. You were not invited to this event, and you're disrupting my guests with unfounded accusations and hostile behavior." Karen's response shocked everyone present. "I'm not leaving until this inappropriate gathering is brought under control. As HOA president, I have oversight authority over community activities, and I'm exercising that authority right now." The security guard approached Marcus discreetly. "Sir, would you like me to call the police? These individuals are trespassing on your property after being asked to leave." Marcus hesitated, hoping to resolve the situation without involving law enforcement. He understood that calling police could escalate tensions in the community and potentially create more problems than it solved. However, Karen's increasingly aggressive behavior was making his guests uncomfortable and threatening to ruin what had been a perfect celebration. "Let me try one more time to handle this diplomatically," Marcus told the security guard. He approached Karen with his hands visible and his voice calm. "Karen, I understand you have concerns about the event, but this is not the appropriate way to address them. Let's schedule a meeting tomorrow to discuss any issues you'd like to raise with the HOA board." Karen's husband Robert made another attempt to convince his wife to leave peacefully. "Karen, please. These people have done nothing wrong, and you're making a scene that's going to reflect badly on all of us. Let's go home and discuss this rationally." Karen turned on her husband with venomous anger. "Stop embarrassing me in front of these people, Robert. I'm trying to protect our community, and I need your support, not your interference." Dr. Lawson, who had been observing the confrontation with growing concern, decided to intervene more directly. Mrs. Mitchell, as someone who has lived in this area for over 20 years, I can tell you that this is exactly the kind of professional, well-managed event that enhances a community's reputation. Your behavior tonight is what's actually threatening property values. Karen's response to Dr. Lawson revealed the depth of her prejudice and entitlement. Don't lecture me about community standards. You don't even live in Willowbrook Estates, so you have no idea what we're dealing with here. We've worked too hard to maintain our exclusive character, to let it be ruined by inappropriate influences. The phrase inappropriate influences caused an audible gasp among several guests who recognized the coded language for what it really meant. Marcus felt a surge of anger but forced himself to maintain composure, understanding that Karen was revealing her true motivations for everyone to witness and record. At this point, Karen made a decision that would have severe legal consequences. Instead of leaving Marcus's property as requested, she began walking around his deck area, approaching individual guests and demanding to see their identification and invitations to prove they belonged at the event. "Excuse me," Karen said to a distinguished elderly gentleman who was actually a retired federal judge. "I'm the HOA president, and I need to verify that you're authorized to be at this gathering. Can I see some identification and your invitation?" The retired judge, Honorable William Patterson, looked at Karen with the kind of stern expression he had perfected during 30 years on the federal bench. "Young lady, I suggest you remove yourself from this property immediately before you find yourself in serious legal trouble." Karen dismissed his warning with a wave of her hand. "I have official authority here, and I'm conducting a legitimate inspection of this event for compliance with community standards." Judge Patterson's voice carried the weight of decades dispensing justice. "You have no authority whatsoever on this private property, and you are currently committing criminal trespass after being asked to leave by the property owner. I strongly advise you to depart immediately." Karen's behavior became even more erratic as she realized that many of Marcus's guests were prominent community members who clearly belonged at such a professional gathering. Rather than admitting her mistake, she doubled down on her confrontational approach. She approached Marcus's business partner, David Chen, a successful attorney who had helped build their company from the ground up. "Sir, I need to see your identification and verify your reason for being at this event." David Chen looked at Karen with the kind of calm intensity that made him formidable in courtrooms. "Ma'am, you are currently committing multiple crimes including criminal trespass, harassment, and potentially violation of civil rights. I strongly recommend you leave immediately before this situation becomes much worse for you legally." Karen's response demonstrated how completely she had lost touch with reality and legal boundaries. "Don't try to intimidate me with legal threats. I know my rights as HOA president, and I'm exercising legitimate authority to protect our community standards." At this point, Marcus realized that Karen's behavior had moved far beyond simple HOA overreach into territory that required legal intervention. He nodded to his security guard, who immediately called 911 to report trespassing and harassment on the property. Karen noticed the security guard making the call and became even more agitated. "You can't call the police on me for exercising my official duties as HOA president. This is legitimate community business and I have every right to be here." Dr. Lawson approached Marcus with concern. "This woman clearly has some serious issues beyond simple community politics. Her behavior suggests she may need professional help, but right now she's creating a dangerous situation for everyone here." Marcus agreed but felt trapped between wanting to protect his guests and hoping to avoid escalating community tensions unnecessarily. "I never wanted it to come to this, but she's left me no choice. Her behavior is completely out of line, and my guests shouldn't have to tolerate harassment at a private celebration." Karen overheard their conversation and launched into an even more aggressive tirade. "Harassment? I'm protecting this community from exactly the kind of inappropriate behavior that threatens everything we've worked to build here. If you people don't like our standards, maybe you should find somewhere else to have your parties." The arrival of police sirens in the distance marked the beginning of the end for Karen's night of aggressive confrontation. However, her troubles were just beginning, as her behavior had been documented by multiple witnesses and recorded on several phones. The evidence being gathered would soon support legal action that would cost her far more than she ever imagined. Marcus's celebration which had been proceeding beautifully until Karen's uninvited intervention, was now permanently disrupted. His guests were uncomfortable and concerned, and what should have been a joyous evening, celebrating professional success, had become a tense confrontation exposing ugly prejudices that lurked beneath the surface of their supposedly civilized community. The police cars pulling into Marcus's driveway would mark the official beginning of legal proceedings that would ultimately vindicate Marcus's rights and expose Karen's behavior for what it really was, a racially motivated attack disguised as HOA enforcement. 2 police officers arrived at Marcus's property within minutes of the 911 call. Officer Sarah Martinez, a veteran with 15 years of experience, immediately assessed the situation by speaking with Marcus, the security guard, and several witnesses who had observed Karen's behavior throughout the evening. Karen rushed toward the officers with her clipboard, confident that her position as HOA president would validate her actions. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. I'm Karen Mitchell, president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, and I've been trying to address serious violations of community standards at this inappropriate gathering, officer." Martinez listened politely to Karen's complaints, but quickly recognized several red flags in her story. "Ma'am, can you show me specific HOA bylaws that give you authority to enter private property without permission and demand identification from guests at a private party?" Karen fumbled through her papers, suddenly realizing she couldn't produce any documentation supporting her claimed authority. "Well, it's implied in my presidential duties to ensure community standards are maintained. This gathering clearly violates the spirit of our neighborhood regulations." Officer Martinez's partner, Officer James Wilson, interviewed Marcus and several guests who provided consistent accounts of Karen's aggressive behavior, use of inflammatory language, and refusal to leave when asked. The officers also reviewed video footage recorded by guests on their phones, which clearly showed Karen trespassing and harassing people at a private event. "Mr. Williams," Officer Martinez said, "do you want to press charges for criminal trespass? This woman had no legal authority to enter your property or harass your guests, regardless of her HOA position." Marcus felt torn between protecting his rights and maintaining community relationships. "Officer, I just want this situation resolved peacefully. If she agrees to leave immediately and not return tonight, I'd prefer to handle this through civil channels rather than criminal prosecution." Karen's husband Robert stepped forward, looking embarrassed and defeated. "Officers, I apologize for my wife's behavior. She got carried away with her HOA responsibilities, and I'll make sure she leaves immediately. This won't happen again." However, Karen refused to accept any wrongdoing or leave voluntarily. "I'm not apologizing for protecting our community standards. These officers need to understand that I have legitimate authority here as HOA president." Judge Patterson, the retired federal judge among Marcus's guests, approached the officers with his identification. "Officers, I'm retired federal judge William Patterson. I witnessed this entire incident, and I can testify that this woman committed criminal trespass, harassment, and potentially hate crime violations. Her language and behavior clearly demonstrated racial motivation. The mention of potential hate crime charges caused Karen to panic. That's completely ridiculous. This has nothing to do with race. This is about community standards and property values. These people are trying to make this about something it's not." Officer Wilson reviewed the video evidence on several phones, which clearly captured Karen's inflammatory language about people like you and inappropriate influences disrupting their exclusive community. The recordings also showed her aggressive behavior toward guests and refusal to leave when asked. "Mrs. Mitchell," Officer Martinez said firmly, "you need to leave this property immediately. Mr. Williams has chosen not to press criminal charges tonight, but if you return or continue harassing residents, you will be arrested for trespassing and harassment." Karen finally realized the seriousness of her legal position, but remained defiant. "Fine, I'll leave, but this isn't over. The HOA board will hear about this inappropriate gathering, and there will be consequences for violating community standards." As Karen's group finally departed, Marcus's guests gradually returned to the celebration, though the atmosphere remained subdued. Many expressed support for Marcus and disgust at Karen's behavior, but the evening's magic had been permanently damaged by the confrontation. Dr. Lawson approached Marcus with concern. That woman's behavior was completely unacceptable, and her language was clearly racially motivated. You can't let this slide, Marcus. She needs to face consequences for what she did tonight. Judge Patterson agreed strongly. Son, I've seen this kind of behavior in courtrooms for 30 years. What happened here tonight was a clear violation of your civil rights under color of authority. You have grounds for significant legal action against her personally and possibly the HOA. David Chen, Marcus's attorney business partner, was already thinking strategically about legal options. Marcus, we need to document everything that happened tonight while it's fresh in everyone's memory. Karen's behavior wasn't just inappropriate. It was illegal harassment disguised as HOA enforcement. Over the following days, Marcus consulted with civil rights attorneys who specialized in housing discrimination and harassment cases. The video evidence, witness testimony, and Karen's own words provided overwhelming proof that her actions were motivated by racial prejudice rather than legitimate HOA concerns. The attorneys explained that Karen's behavior constituted several different legal violations. Her use of HOA authority to harass Marcus based on racial prejudice violated federal civil rights laws. Her trespassing and harassment of guests created additional liability. Most significantly, her pattern of targeting Marcus with frivolous complaints since he moved to the community demonstrated ongoing discrimination. Marcus learned that he could pursue multiple legal remedies. He could file criminal complaints for trespassing and harassment. He could sue Karen individually for civil rights violations, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and defamation. He could also potentially sue the HOA if they had enabled or failed to address her discriminatory behavior. The case became stronger when other Willowbrook residents came forward with their own stories about Karen's inappropriate behavior. Several neighbors reported that she had made similar comments about Marcus not belonging in their community and had repeatedly tried to rally support for making his life difficult. One neighbor, Patricia Wong, a retired teacher, provided a particularly damning account. Karen approached me several times asking if I was concerned about our kind of people being displaced by those people moving into the neighborhood. She specifically mentioned Marcus and suggested we needed to make sure he understood our community standards. Another neighbor, Tom Bradley, reported that Karen had pressured him to support frivolous complaints against Marcus's property. She kept saying we needed to send a message that certain behaviors wouldn't be tolerated in Willowbrook. It was clear she wasn't talking about legitimate HOA issues. The attorneys advised Marcus that he had an exceptionally strong case for significant damages. Karen's behavior had been witnessed by prominent community members, recorded on video, and demonstrated a clear pattern of racial harassment, disguised as HOA enforcement. Marcus struggled with the decision to pursue legal action. Part of him wanted to move on and avoid further community conflict. However, he realized that Karen's behavior represented something larger than a personal dispute. It was about establishing that successful people of color had the same rights as anyone else to enjoy their achievements. And property without harassment, Dr. Lawson, helped him reach his decision during a conversation a week after the incident. Marcus, this isn't just about you anymore. That woman's behavior was a textbook example of how racism operates in supposedly progressive communities. If you don't hold her accountable, she'll continue targeting other people who don't fit her narrow definition of who belongs in Willowbrook. Marcus ultimately decided to file comprehensive legal action against Karen individually, seeking damages for civil rights violations, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and defamation. The lawsuit would seek $100,000 in damages for each guest who was harassed at his celebration, creating potential liability exceeding. Marcus filed his lawsuit 3 weeks after the incident, seeking $100,000 in damages for each of the 100 guests who had been harassed at his celebration. The total potential liability of $10 million sent shockwaves through the Willowbrook estates community and attracted significant media attention to the case. The lawsuit detailed how Karen had violated multiple federal and state laws through her racially motivated harassment disguised as HOA enforcement. Marcus's legal team, led by renowned civil rights attorney Rebecca Santos, presented overwhelming evidence including video recordings, witness testimony, and documentation of Karen's pattern of discriminatory behavior. Karen initially dismissed the lawsuit as frivolous, confident that her position as HOA president provided legal protection for her actions. She hired a local attorney who specialized in HOA disputes, not understanding that she was facing serious civil rights violations that went far beyond simple community governance issues. Her attorney, Michael Roberts, quickly realized the severity of Karen's legal position after reviewing the evidence. The video recordings were particularly damaging, clearly showing her aggressive behavior, inflammatory language, and refusal to leave private property when asked. The witness testimony from prominent community members, including a retired federal judge, made the case nearly impossible to defend. "Karen," Roberts told his client during their second meeting, "you're facing potential personal liability that could destroy your financial future. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and the plaintiffs have an excellent legal team. We need to seriously consider settlement negotiations." Karen refused to accept responsibility for her actions or consider settlement. "I was protecting our community standards, and I won't apologize for that. These people are trying to intimidate me with frivolous legal threats, but I know I was within my rights as HOA president." Her attitude changed dramatically when Roberts explained the potential consequences. "Karen, you could lose your house, your savings, and face personal bankruptcy if this case goes to trial. The video evidence alone proves you committed criminal trespass and harassment. The racial language you used creates additional liability under federal civil rights laws." The HOA board held an emergency meeting to address the lawsuit and Karen's behavior. Several board members had witnessed the incident or heard detailed accounts from neighbors, and they were horrified by the legal and financial implications for the community. Board member Janet Martinez, a retired corporate lawyer, led the discussion. "Karen's actions have exposed our entire organization to potential liability. She had no authority to enter private property or harass residents, regardless of her position as president. We need to distance ourselves from her behavior immediately." The board voted unanimously to remove Karen as president and issue a public statement clarifying that her actions were not authorized by the HOA. They also implemented new policies requiring board approval for any official HOA interventions and mandatory training on civil rights and discrimination laws. Karen's husband Robert faced enormous pressure as the legal and financial implications became clear. Their homeowner's insurance policy specifically excluded coverage for intentional discriminatory acts, meaning they would be personally liable for any judgment. Their financial advisor estimated they could lose their home and retirement savings if the case proceeded to trial. "Karen, you need to face reality," Robert told his wife after meeting with their financial advisor. "We could lose everything because of your behavior that night. Our insurance won't cover intentional discrimination, and we don't have $10 million to pay if you lose this lawsuit." The case gained national media attention when civil rights organizations highlighted it as an example of how racism operates in affluent communities. News outlets picked up the story, focusing on Karen's abuse of HOA authority to harass a successful black businessman and his guests. The media coverage was devastating for Karen's reputation and real estate business. Clients began canceling listings, and her professional colleagues distanced themselves from association with someone involved in such a high-profile discrimination case. Her income plummeted as the scandal spread throughout the local business community. Meanwhile, Marcus received overwhelming support from the community and business leaders who had witnessed Karen's behavior. Many of his celebration guests provided detailed statements, supporting his lawsuit and describing how Karen's harassment had made them feel unwelcome and uncomfortable. Dr. Jennifer Lawson organized a group of Marcus's professional colleagues to issue a public statement condemning Karen's behavior. "What we witnessed that night was a clear example of racial harassment, disguised as community enforcement. Marcus Williams is an exemplary citizen and successful businessman who deserves the same respect and privacy as any other homeowner." 6 months after filing the lawsuit, Marcus's legal team had assembled an overwhelming case that Karen's attorneys realized was impossible to defend. The evidence included video recordings, testimony from over 50 witnesses, documentation of Karen's pattern of discriminatory behavior, and expert analysis proving her actions violated multiple civil rights laws. Karen's attorney made increasingly desperate attempts to negotiate a settlement, but Marcus's legal team maintained their position, seeking full damages. "Our client was subjected to deliberate racial harassment in front of 100 professional colleagues and friends," attorney Rebecca Santos explained. The defendant's actions were intentional, malicious, and designed to humiliate him based on his race. The breakthrough came when additional evidence emerged showing Karen had sent emails to other HOA members using explicitly racial language about Marcus and suggesting coordinated efforts to make him uncomfortable in the community. These emails provided smoking gun evidence of intentional racial discrimination that made her legal position completely indefensible. Faced with certain defeat at trial and potential personal bankruptcy, Karen finally agreed to settlement negotiations. The final settlement required her to pay Marcus $8 million in damages, issue a public apology acknowledging her discriminatory behavior, attend mandatory sensitivity training, and resign from all HOA positions permanently. The settlement also included payments to several guests who had been particularly targeted by Karen's harassment. Judge Patterson received $200,000, Dr. Lawson received $150,000, and other prominent guests received varying amounts based on the severity of harassment they experienced. Karen was forced to sell her Willowbrook Estates home to help fund the settlement payments. She and Robert moved to a modest apartment across town, their financial future permanently damaged by her night of racist harassment disguised as HOA enforcement. The case became a landmark example of how civil rights laws protect homeowners from discriminatory harassment by HOA officials. Legal experts cited it in training. Materials about the boundaries of HOA authority and the serious consequences of using community positions to target residents based on race. Marcus used part of his settlement money to establish a legal defense fund, helping other homeowners facing similar discrimination. He continued living in his beautiful Willowbrook Estates mansion, hosting elegant celebrations without interference from anyone questioning his right to enjoy his success. The community learned a valuable lesson about the difference between legitimate governance and discriminatory harassment. Karen's behavior had exposed ugly prejudices that many residents didn't realize existed in their supposedly progressive neighborhood, leading to important conversations about inclusion and respect for all community members regardless of race or background. Marcus's victory sent a clear message that successful people of color would not tolerate harassment disguised as community standards, and that those who engaged in such behavior would face serious legal and financial consequences for their actions.